Hey everyone, it's White Cross, and you have joined me for Stacking Mexican Silver Volume 3, 1900 to 1950. If you are visiting the channel for the first time, thank you for spending some time with me here today. I really appreciate it. If you are one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys so much for spending some more time with me. It really means a lot and makes this project worthwhile to know that there are people who keep coming back to see more and more of this type of information. And if you are a returning visitor but you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and click on that subscription button. We would love to have you be part of this community. If you are new to the channel, I like to begin each of my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 3 or 4 decades. And I also like to begin each of my videos with a couple of concepts. And this time, since we're talking about Mexican coinage and we're really starting to get into those really interesting, big, heavy, solid silver issues from the 1900s, it's important to kind of understand a couple of Spanish words, a couple of words that you'll see on these coins. Now, I am not a Spanish speaker, and I apologize for my pronunciation of these, but you can learn these along with me. These are some pretty important terms. I'm not going to hit you with a ton of them, just 3 or 4 key ones that you can keep in the back of your mind. They will help you along the way if you decide to stack this type of silver. And believe me, this is a fascinating and really fun area of silver stacking. So the first concept and term is the word plata, P-L-A-T-A. That's it. It just means silver. Silver is plata in Spanish. And pura, P-U-R-A, means, anyone? It means pure. So that's it. Those are some pretty easy ones. The last concept or term that I want to throw at you is a little bit more difficult and a little bit more nuanced, and that is the word ley, L-E-Y. Technically, that word means law. It means legality. It means legal. L-E-Y means legality. But in terms of precious metals, especially when you're looking at these types of issues from the early 1900s all the way through 1950 and beyond, you'll often see the word L-E-Y on these coins. And it does mean legal, but it also has to do with, I think, more of a concept of by law. So you're saying that these pieces are a certain purity of silver by law, ley, L-E-Y. So plata, pura, and ley. Just 3 easy terms. Plata means silver, pura means pure, ley means by law, legally. So, silver coins from Mexico from the 20th century. I made the case in the last video that I think these are really some of the earliest examples of what we consider to be bullion. And it's really easy to overlook just how earth-shattering or game-changing Mexican silver was. When we think about silver coinage, we in America tend to think about 90% silver coins. It's only natural. Those were the coins that we spent in this country when silver was money, all the way from the 1700s up and through 1964. 90% silver. But there are very few examples of American coinage that actually state their weight and purity on them. And looking back at it now, we all kind of agree that we know what a silver dime is, we know what a silver quarter is, we know what a silver $50 is. So why was there any need? Just by the same token that silver rounds and silver bars that we stack now, can you imagine if those bars or rounds did not say on them how much they weighed and what their purity was? It's a really strange concept to think that for hundreds of years, we just assumed that the weight of the silver quarter was correct and it weighed a certain number of grains or grams and its purity was 90%. You know, a lot of that is based on the faith of the American government, one of the largest refineries and one of the largest coin minters in the world has ever seen. But if you look at it in terms of modern bullion, where we're talking about a 10-ounce bar from the UK and the Britannia series, if you're talking about a Germania bar, if you're talking about a Scottsdale bar or a Silvertown bar, or a round or a modern silver coin like the American Eagle or the maple, having those not indicate on them what their silver content is would be bizarre. And yet that's the way most coins were for much of history, until we start seeing these descriptions on the Mexican and Spanish colonial pieces. And just as a quick refresher, this is an example of one of those 8 reales, and we talked about these in the last video, where you actually see the 10D, 20G, that is the gramos and dineros of purity. They're indicating on these coins, and this one going all the way back to 1885, just exactly what the purity of the silver was. Now, that's a little bit archaic. These are kind of some medieval type terms, and they're a little bit difficult for us to understand, but they make a break from that in the 20th century. And these Mexican pieces really start to spell out exactly what their silver content is, what the purity is, and what the weight is. And that, I think, really laid the groundwork for what modern bullion pieces become. So let's start kind of at the beginning. We kind of went over the very beginnings of the 1900s in the last video, but we're going to back up just a little bit, and we're going to talk about some of those earliest coins. The caballito. Caballito was a peso that was released in 1910 through 1914. This is considered one of the most beautiful coins ever produced. Caballito, if my Spanish is correct, means small horse, essentially. So that is Lady Liberty riding a small horse, and you can see this is a beautiful coin. This silver coin came out in 1910 through 1914, and it commemorates the 100th anniversary of Hidalgo's cry for Dolores, the Grito de Dolores. That was kind of one of the beginnings of the Mexican Revolution, the same way we might in America think of the Boston Tea Party. So Hidalgo, one of the early kind of founders of the Mexican Revolution, was a Catholic priest, and we'll talk about him. He makes an appearance in a lot of Mexican coins, but this is a stunning example of how Mexico kind of started off that 20th century, 1910 to 1914. 27.07 grams of 0.903 purity. So compare that to a US silver dollar, 26.73 grams of 900 silver. The actual silver weight, 0.7859, a silver dollar, 0.7734. So you can see that this is really close to a silver dollar, and I've got some examples of silver dollars here just to take a quick look for comparison. Obviously a Morgan dollar there on the left, 1900, versus this caballito, 1913. A very similar piece, and I'm going to try not to clank these coins around as much as I have in some of the earlier videos. A lot of these coins do have significant numismatic, that is coin collector value, and I might clank some of my less nice coins around a little bit, but I will try to take nice care of these pieces. Caballito, one of the nicest, one of the most beautiful Mexican silver coins, arguably one of the nicest silver coins ever released. These go for about $150, even used and abused. And an interesting thing about these caballitos is that so many of them seem to be cleaned or wiped. My numismatic friends out there who are watching, when I pick this coin up, probably noticed that there are slight hairlines. Those are really, really light. See if I can get them into focus. I'm not sure that I can. Over here in the toned area, you might just capture, there we go, some of those lines, all unidirectional lines kind of going diagonally across the coin. An example of a coin that's been wiped. I wouldn't say this coin has been overly cleaned. It still has some of that cartwheel luster, but at some point, somebody carelessly or intentionally wiped this coin, probably with something like a small towel or a rag, gave it those unilateral, universally unidirectional lines, and that's an indication that a coin has been wiped. So many of these caballitos, even with their really small mintages, seem to have those kind of condition issues that drives the prices up really high on those pieces that were able to escape that kind of treatment. I always say when it comes to coins, people lament those coins that have been cleaned or that have big gouges in them or have big scratches in them. But honestly, that's what makes a rare coin a rare coin. It avoided all of that attrition that we talked about in some of the very early videos in these series. And it's those survivors that really kind of make up the base of those valuable coins. Caballito, a great way for Mexico to start off kind of the 100th anniversary of their revolution and the 20th century, the early 1900s. The next coin here, and what will be interesting to see as we progress in this series, we'll talk about inflation. I know a lot of my silver stackers out there see silver as a great way to counteract inflation. I kind of feel that myself to an extent. But this is a really great real-world example where you will see some of these early coins valued at a peso, and we will see just how rapidly that peso devalues over the course of the 20th century. It's kind of startling. Keep your eyes open for it, and I'll try to point it out. Dos pesos. This is a 1921 Dos pesos. It was a one-year series, a beautiful coin. And if you are already a Mexican silver stacker, you are going to recognize that symbol. That symbol obviously is the same as we see on the Libertad. So this is Winged Liberty, the Winged Independence, Winged Victory, a one-year type, 1921 only. 1,278,000. These two seem to have been cleaned and abused for some reason. There were just so many of them that seem to suffer from that same kind of condition issue. But it's really important when we're talking about the information that I was talking about earlier about how these coins really start that whole idea of modern bullion. Look what it says right there on the front of the coin, right there in bold letters, 24 grams plata pura. You remember we talked about those concepts, the Spanish words at the beginning of this video. Plata means silver, pura means pure. 24 grams of pure silver. It couldn't spell that out any more clearly. 1921. One of the nice things about 1921 is also the first year that they made the Centenario. This is a 50 peso. This is one of the largest circulating gold coins. The gold coins really circulate at this point, probably not so much, but this dwarfs the American $20 gold piece, the Centenario 50 peso, and obviously the same design element used on both of these beautiful coins. So we're leaving kind of 1900 to 1921. We had the caballito, we had the Dos pesos with that Winged Liberty, and we go into what really became the workhorse Mexican silver piece that lasted for years, and that is these examples of these pesos. These are single pesos, single silver pesos. These from 1920 to 1945, they made hundreds of millions of these. They brought back the Resplendor image that we saw earlier when we were talking about that 8 reale piece from 1800s. So it's a very similar device. It's got that Phrygian cap, and also or considered a pileus cap, a freedom cap, and the rays coming out of it. So they kind of duplicated that device again. This is in 1933. 1920 to 1945, hundreds of millions made. Resplendor design comes back. 16.6 grams, and it's really difficult to see, but these coins also say on them what their purity is. See, right above the eagle's head to the left and the right, it says 0.720. This is a 72% silver coin. That 72%, 0.720, is a really common purity that we see a lot in 20th century Mexican pieces. I always kind of thought it was a discounted amount. When we think about silver purities, especially for coins, I tend to think about American coins, those 90%. But there were a lot of standards that were popular all over the world, and we'll talk a little bit about one of the most popular coins, that is the Maria Teresa Thaler. We've mentioned her a few times in the past, and she'll come into play a little bit later in this series in the next video. But 0.83 was the purity of those thalers that were popular for hundreds of years. 0.72 was just another silver standard that was common in Mexico. Mexico had produced a lot of silver, one of the largest silver producers of all times, of all countries, and they also produce a lot of copper. Not that unusual when you think about it, for a coin to be 72% silver. That was a standard that they used. I like these pesos a lot. Now, we don't think of these pesos being the equivalent of a silver dollar. It's easy to have that mindset. I think what's really more accurate would be to consider these to be about a half dollar. In American currency, that was really what this was kind of competing against. 16.6 grams of 0.72 silver, exactly half of the silver weight of that dos pesos that we saw earlier. So it's keeping with the same norm that they had set up. But compared to a silver dollar, 0.617 grams. So this peso, 0.385 silver weight, a silver half dollar, 0.3617. So these actually have slightly more silver than our American silver half dollar. And I think that's a really good way to think of these. Think of these as kind of the equivalent of American silver half dollar. A beautiful coin. These are available in such large numbers. You can still find these on places like eBay. I looked these up before I started shooting here. The caballito, $150 to $350. You can go sky high if you want one that is truly uncirculated. Those MS-65 examples. The dos peso, the 1921, we talked about somewhere in that $150 range. These 1 pesos, 1920 to 1945, 15 bucks. You can find them for $15 or $20. Your local dealers or coin shows, you can pick these up. Average circulated condition for about that $15 range. You can find a nice uncirculated example, and both of those examples that I'm showing right now, I would consider these to be uncirculated. You've got that nice cartwheel luster. This one's got a little bit of rainbow toning. It's hard to see on my camera, hard to pick that up, but these are maybe $30 a piece. So an interesting option if you want a really nice uncirculated example, but if you are just in this for the silver stacking, consider it to be the equivalent of a silver half dollar from the United States, and see if you can pick those up for less money than you would pay for a walking liberty, because they stopped making these in 1945. So this is kind of a concurrent issue that was made at the same period of time that those walking liberty half dollars came out from the United States. The next piece, this is one of my all-time silver issues from anywhere. And if you've seen some of my earlier videos on silver coinage, I touch on these a little bit, but I've never really gotten into just how much I love these. This is a 2-year series, 1947 to 1948. Remember, we were just talking about the 1 peso coins up to 1945, so these followed really shortly thereafter. And I call these the cuauhtemoc, and you can kind of see that. He was an Aztec ruler, and see his name right beneath the breast there. These just say 1940s, 1950s, kind of that Indiana Jones vibe of archaeological discovery in and around these parts of the world. A stunningly beautiful coin. I've always loved these, and I've been picking these up for 15 or 20 years. Anytime I could find them, I would pick them up. One of my all-time favorite pieces. So how does this compare with a 1 peso? 1947, 1948, mintage of about 30 million pieces. And again, it says right on the front of the coin, 30 gramos, lei, there's that by law or legally pure, 900 silver, 30 grams of 900 silver. It says right on the front of the coin exactly how much silver is contained in these. Compare it to a US silver dollar. So at 30 grams of 900 silver, their actual silver weight is 0.8681, while an American silver dollar, 0.7734. So these are actually larger than an American silver dollar. And I'll put it down and do some gentle comparisons again, trying to be a little bit more careful with these pieces as they are particularly nice examples. Comparing it to a peace dollar as close as I can get, because of course the United States of America was not producing a large silver coin at this period of time. We stopped making the peace dollar in 1935. These pieces going all the way up to 1948. So there's the obverse. Now, technically, when we're talking about Mexican coinage, generally speaking, the side that has the state seal on it, the seal of the state of Mexico, this is the obverse. This is the front of the coin. We don't see coins that way, but it's their coinage, and that's the way they saw it. So comparing the two, side-by-side comparison. A beautiful coin worthy of its status as being one of Mexico's nicest silver coins. And you can just see it is larger than an American silver dollar and the same purity of an American silver dollar. So this, one of my all-time favorite Mexican 20th century silver pieces. I've got rolls and rolls of them, and I still seek them out to this day. Whenever I'm in a shop, it's one of the first things that I look for. They are available also. The mintage wasn't huge on these, about 32 million. So it was comparable to maybe a moderate range piece dollar of the same kind of era, somewhere in that 30 million range. And extremely fine examples can be found on eBay right now in that $30 price range. So compare that to an American silver dollar. If you are interested in stacking these and you are given the option of culls or very good American silver dollars versus one of these in about uncirculated condition, they actually have more silver and they can be found cheaper. A really nice uncirculated example, raw, meaning that it has not been slabbed by a certification service. Those run somewhere in that $50 range. Keep your eyes open for them. Take your loop with you. If you see an uncirculated example being offered to you with nice cartwheel luster, with those deep fields, with nice evidence that there's no cleaning or tampering with the coin, if you can find one of these in that $30 range, snap it up. They're not making any more of these. 1948, the last year. 1947, the first year for that series, a considerably smaller mintage. So keep your eyes out for the 47s in particular. At least I think that's right. And that brings us to one of the pieces that is most exciting to me in terms of silver stacking and really drives home the point about those Mexican pieces that show the weight and purity on them. We talked a little bit about it in the last video when we talked about those 1898 peso restrikes that were made for China in Mexico. 1949, backdated so that they would be more palatable to the soldiers who were fighting for Chiang Kai-shek. 1949, also the first year that Mexico released the onza. So this was a one-year mintage in 1949. And the beauty about this that I talked briefly about in the last video, 1 ounce troy, 480 grains of plata pura, pure silver. So that's got the weight in troy ounces, the weight in grains, and really small here, you can see it even says peso. If you remember from the last video series, the word we talked about was peso, meaning weight. The weight of 33.625 grams. And then it says lei 925. Remember that lei word meaning purity. So they're even talking about the purity. The weight in troy ounces, which is a first as far as I know. The weight in grains, the weight in grams, and the purity up to the 10,000ths. 0.925 purity. This was a game changer, in my opinion, really the first modern silver bullion piece, and it came out all the way back in 1949. If you can find these, incidentally, they look a lot like the modern pieces that are very, very similar. We'll talk about those in the next video, 1978 to 1980. Mexico kind of re-released these as gearing up as a modern bullion piece. But if you can find those in that 1 year 1949 mintage, snap them up. If you can find them for silver value or, a few dollars more than that, I am a huge fan of that onza for all the reasons that we talked about. Really the first example of modern silver bullion. Mintage of about 1 million. In fact, a mintage of exactly 1 million pieces. Purity of 925. The weight of troy ounces, grams, and grains. And the examples that I found online that have sold recently on a venue like eBay, $75 to $80 a piece. I think you can probably find them a little bit less expensive than that. Remember, this is a 1 year type. We're not talking about those ones made in the late 1970s and early 1980s. We will talk about those in the next video, but this is a 1 year type. This is a great example. Let me just do a quick aside. When we're talking about the value of coins, Again, this has got some beautiful cartwheel luster. It does have a few bumps and dings on the surface. That doesn't technically change its grade. This is still probably on that Sheldon scale of 1 to 70. I would say this is probably a 62 or 63. So it is technically an uncirculated coin, even though it does have a few bag marks here and there on the surface. But here's an example of the same coin that has been cleaned. You can see the cartwheel on the one on the left, how those spokes follow all the way around the coin. You don't get very much of that at all on this piece. This piece has been cleaned. All of that sparkle, all of that shine, all of that luster is one tone all the way around the coin, and it just doesn't have the life that the coin on the left does. Still happy to have this. It's a lightly cleaned piece. It's a 70-year-old coin. An important distinction to make with these, technically not a coin. These would probably be considered a metal because they're not denominated. They didn't have a denomination on them. We'll talk about the differences between pieces that are denominated and not denominated in the next video a little bit. The Libertad, one of the most popular and one of my favorite silver pieces, does not have a denomination on it, but it is still considered to be a coin. Those onzas from 1949, technically probably not a coin. A subtle distinction, but it's one to keep in the back of your mind. 1950, so those were 1949. We'll go right up to 1950, and I'm searching desperately for, this is our railroad 5 peso. So this was a celebration of the Mexican Railroad going all the way to the tip of Merida on the Yucatan Peninsula, and a beautiful piece. This is kind of the starting era for what are really probably considered the most modern mid-century Mexican silver pieces. Estados Unidos Mexicanos, 5 pesos, obviously 5 meaning 5. The date of 1950, but you see in the small lettering there, ley, 0.20, weight, peso, 27 7/9 grams. Now that is an interesting way of expressing it, but this is a piece that is 73 years old now. You have to give props to the country of Mexico for putting that silver weight and silver purity. A 1-year issue, 1950 only, 720 silver, 27.78 grams, the actual silver weight on these, 0.6431, or the equivalent of 0.1286 per peso. Now, it was a concept that I kind of talked a little bit about at the beginning of this video. We're seeing inflation starting to come into play. Each peso in the cuauhtemoc was 0.1736 of a troy ounce. Remember, these are 5 pesos, so these contain 5 pesos worth of silver. In that short period of time, from 0.736 of a troy ounce to, in the Southern Railroad pieces, you're talking about 0.128. So from 0.173 of a troy ounce to 0.128 of a troy ounce. We're already seeing that devaluation. We're already seeing that inflation. We're seeing the value of the silver start to really cook. Now, we'll go back and look at the 1914, the 1913 caballito. This was a peso. This was one single peso. This now in 1950 is 5 pesos, and they are virtually identical in terms of size and weight. I think the caballito is actually a little bit more silver contained within. So from 1913 to 1950, we have seen the peso devalued almost by 1 in 5. It went from 1 peso to 5 pesos in essentially the same silver coinage. A fascinating way to keep track of these. If you are a silver stacker, really what we're interested in is those weights and measures given on the front of the coins. Sure, you can look at scarcity, definitely look at condition, but ultimately, if you are stacking Mexican silver, you're really interested in that purity and that weight. 1950. 1951 to 1954, Mexico released a series of coins that were supposed to celebrate Hidalgo. And we talked about Hidalgo before, Catholic priest who really kind of started off the Mexican Revolution If his face looks familiar, you have probably seen this exact same face on Mexican gold coinage of the same period of time, from 1920 to all the way through 1940, and with the restrikes that continue to be made to this day, they almost all have this picture of Hidalgo on them. So these are 5 pesos from roughly the same period of time. These 5 peso pieces, 1951 to 1954. I should mention it, in 1953, they also made a release that was a 3/4 bust of Hidalgo, kind of looking out toward from the surface of the coin. These were a popular coin. Again, 35 million of these, and they are 27.78 grams of 720 silver. And you can see peso, 27 and 7/9 grams of lei, 0.720. Again, they're talking about the purity on the front of these coins. So we've seen the value of the peso kind of diminishing rapidly, but this is an interesting version of that. 1951 to 1954, and then in 1955, Mexico released the 10 peso with Hidalgo on them. Now, we talked about inflation and how quickly it was starting to devalue. A 1-year difference between a 5 peso and a 10 peso. To be fair, the 10 peso of the same period of time was actually slightly more silver. So these are a smaller mintage, 40 millimeters, the same size as the 5 peso, 28.88 grams of 90% silver. 0.0853 troy ounce per peso. Now, we talked about the value of silver per peso. The last issue, it was 0.1286 per troy ounce, per peso of a troy ounce. And this issue, it's 0.1736. So it was rapidly devalued. And then we see on these pieces 28.888 grams of lei 900. It couldn't be any larger, easier to understand. 28.888 grams of 900 silver. These were kind of a beefy coin. 1955 to 1956, again, smaller mintage, but compare it to the United States silver dollar. Again, we weren't making silver coins of this size in this period of time. We stopped in 1935. So these pieces actually larger again than American silver dollar. If you can find these pieces, and if they are not selling at a premium, they are an interesting option to add to your silver stack. I've been fortunate enough to come up with several rolls of each of these, and that's why I'm talking about them. There were some issues that were released in the same period of time, and I don't have very many examples of them, and we'll talk about a couple of those in the next video, but this is a great example of how these silver pieces, if they can be found with little or no premium, they make a great addition to a modern silver stack. And since there were no American silver coins of this size being made at this period of time, 1935, all the way up until the time that we started making silver Eisenhower dollars, I suppose, these are a great option, especially if you have a significant date that you want to commemorate, if there's a year that means a lot to you, if it's a birth date or an anniversary. The silver Mexican coins of this period of time are an interesting alternative, especially those pieces that say right on them what the purity is and what the weight is. A fantastic way to know exactly how much silver is contained within your silver stack. I do have one piece I want to warn you about, and these ones are really easy to slip into. And this is maybe one of the reasons that some people avoid Mexican silver a little bit. It can be a little bit confusing. We're talking about the difference in purity of 900 silver versus 0.720, that's 72% silver. So there is a variety of ranges. But again, fortunately, almost all of these say right on them what the purity is and what the weight is. There was a peso, 1957 to 1967, the same period of time as these pieces. And a lot of coin stackers probably have these. They were everywhere when I was a kid, and those 3 for $0.25 bins are now 3 for $1 bins at your local coin shops. They look like a silver peso from this same period of time. What's missing from these that you've seen on all the rest of those pieces? Take a close look at the obverse. Remember, the design with the eagle on it is technically the obverse, the front. Take a good look at the reverse. What's missing? There is no indication of the silver value. There is no indication of the weight. There is no indication of the purity. And there's a reason for that. Those 1 peso coins of this period of time are 0.10 purity, 10% silver. And in fact, these are considered billion. And that's a word that we haven't talked about, B-I-L-L-O-N, not billion, but any coin that has, as a precious metal content less than 50% is technically considered a billion coin. And these are 10% silver. Really, they are just washed with a little bit of silver across the surface. And you can find really circulated examples where that silver is almost completely gone. They are, I believe, copper and zinc also on the inside. I'm not saying don't buy these, but don't really consider these part of your silver stack. The amount of silver contained with them is so low. At 0.10 purity, their actual silver weight is 0.0514 of a troy ounce. 0.0 anything is probably something that should be avoided. But a silver dime, an American silver dime, 0.07 of a troy ounce. So 0.05 versus 0.07. And if we really want to get technical about it, even a war nickel, this is a 1943 dated war nickel. When the United States of America found that they needed nickel for the war effort, they substituted silver in some of our nickels. 0.056. So at 0.0514, this coin contains less silver than a silver war nickel. And there are rarely premiums on these pieces. I don't know of any smelters who sell them or who will buy them. I don't know of any bullion dealers who sell them. So they may be an interesting coin if you want to have some 20th century Mexican pieces in your collection, but strongly encourage you to avoid these as part of your silver stack. They're kind of a heartbreaker when people find that out. And it's really a little bit devious, I think, almost of Mexico to have done this. This is that early peso, again, 1933, these made all the way up to 1944. Within 15 years, they went from being a nice big silver coin equivalent to an American $50 in terms of our silver, and to these pieces that have almost no silver in them. 1 peso coins, almost the exact same size. Boy, they sure look like they're silver, but these are the ones that I think you probably should avoid. So, there we go. 20th century Mexican silver stacking from about the 1900s. We talked about the caballitos in the 1910s, celebrating that anniversary of the Mexican Revolution. And we got all the way through technically 1967 for these wannabe silver pieces. The next video, we'll talk about some commemorative pieces that came out in force in Mexico in the same period of time. And fortunately, like most of the precursors to those pieces, they say right on them the weight and the purity. Easy to understand if you just know the tiniest little bit of Spanish: plata pura, ley, billion, and then we'll talk a little bit more in some of the new series when we talk about oro, when we start talking about those gold coinages of the same period of time. 20th century Mexican silver, 1900 to about 1950. The next one we'll pick up where we left off here, and we'll go into some of those exciting 20th century pieces that we're all kind of inspired by, like the Libertad, and we'll talk about some of the more interesting pieces that came out in the same period of time. If you have any questions about any of these pieces from the early 20th century, from the early 1900s, leave a comment down below and I'll see if I can address your issue. If you have any suggestions on videos that you'd like to see me make about any of these pieces or any other pieces from the Mexican coinage series from this period of time, leave a comment. I'll look and see if I've got any inventory in the knowledge base to help answer that question, whatever it may be. If you'd like to see examples of any of these talked about in detail, we can certainly do that too, but it was my intent to kind of give you a generalized look at all of these pieces from the same period of time and compare them. And in the next video, I'll also talk about my favorite pieces from this period of time, since both of these videos, this one and the next one, talk about 20th century Mexican silver. I'll give you White Cross's picks, the ones that I think have the most bang for the buck, the ones that I like to stack. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.